writing the blog posts and these types of things, how did that bring discipline and innovation into kind of what ProfitWell ended up doing from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I know we're going to get into this, but without going too deep now to like answer your question, I think what it forced me to do is like I started writing a blog post a week, then got to 2 blog posts a week, right? And trying to be creative on both how you distribute those and also like the audience you build, and literally just ran the loop of, all right, blog post, publish it, leads to an ebook, downloads, and just run that wheel over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And I think that when I was about to hire like an actual marketing hire, what ended up happening is I was like, well, what kind of marketing do we want to be? And this wasn't quite as linear as I'm going to present it. It's just in hindsight, it gets a lot more linear, or able to speak it to it as if it was linear. Like it first became, well, what kind of marketing works in our space, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to have these constraints because it's not like you have a huge budget where you can kind of like, well, let's just try 6 things. It's easier to try 6 things and, let's see which ones succeed. It was very much like, well, our audience is 150,000-ish subscription companies. And really it's probably less than that, in terms of addressable market. And so if it's that low, like, paid will work, but paid will not be a big thing. Like it's not going to be the thing that like necessarily scales, right? And then you go through all the different channels that you think about, right? And you have to do a little bit of everything, but then like what are the big swings? And this is what led us to be the first company in B2B to do the media strategy, because I started doing the research, the first principles research on, okay, interesting. Like you look at Bloomberg, which is actually a software or hardware company a lot of people don't remember, like they get so much traffic. Like the average number of hits per like target account is like, 4 to 6, depending on the week for them. For a B2B blog post, it might be like 1 to 1.5. And so we kind of started putting 2 and 2 together of like, well, if we ended up, marketing like a media company and then monetizing like a software company, like it's a really beautiful thing that you can do. And so without those constraints, we wouldn't necessarily have that. And then I think on some of the bigger swings, right, that you're talking about, I think those things come, but with time, right? So for example, you guys have, in my opinion, one of the best, or you had, you're no longer there, but you're a founder,
right.
Gainsight, you have one of the best B2B conferences and communities I think that exists, right? It's up there with Inbound, it's up there with, some of the other, conferences that we all know and love, right? But I think that like what we did is we were like, okay, we know we have to work up to that, right? And we know, and we didn't do it, at ProfitWell, but like, we hosted our Recur conference for the first time. It was like single track, make it really simple, make sure everyone has a good time, that type of thing, right? Make sure it doesn't like, we break even, right? Like that was the focus. Then the next year, and really it was like 5 years of iteration. And then after the last year, which was right before COVID, we were like, okay, cool. Like what's next, right? And then it was like, let's do a bigger thing, like kind of like a pulse or kind, because we've like iterated through it. And I think that's the difference when you're bootstrapping is like, you can do all those things, but your first iteration is probably going to be smaller than someone who's venture backed. And I think there's some advantages to that and there's some disadvantages, but it's one of those things where I think that's the problem with like marketers never really get the budgets, even if they're bootstrapped, that they should get. And a lot of them think, well, I can't do these big things. And it's like, no, you can. You just have to like start small and then grow up to it, because then the ROI comes. And so those are some thoughts on like that restriction that, breeds that expression.